Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I'm your host, Kiana Canada. Welcome to the Kiana Canada Show. Before we get into tonight's topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember, your likes and your shares, what it does is that it pushes these kinds of discussions up in the algorithm. And essentially what it does is it tells the algorithm that these discussions are important. There is a reminder that I want to give to you that just because these kinds of videos and discussions are not pushed up in the algorithm, that does not mean that you don't have to do your duty in pushing them up or pushing them up yourself. Also, as a preliminary matter, don't forget to follow me on Facebook by searching for my name. That's at Kiana Canada, Q-U-I-A-N-N-A, last name Canada. And I will link my Facebook account in the description box below. Tonight we are talking about the conduct of ICE in a broader discussion about whether or not Black Americans should go out and protest the extrajudicial executions of American citizens that we are seeing take place in the nation. Now, as you know, ICE, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement has become Bush Telegraph in the United States and in other nations as well. I have seen The Journal, which is an Irish publication, posting about the recent lethal use of force in the United States. I've seen the Irish Times post about it. So this is not a story that is contained within the nation. And so I want us to sit in exedra of this topic related to ICE, its lethal conduct, and whether or not continuing that discussion on whether or not Black Americans should go out and protest these kinds of incidents. As you know, I previously posted a video and I stated Black Americans, only if you feel compelled to, you should go out and you should protest in Minneapolis, the extrajudicial executions happening within the United States that is being perpetrated by ICE officials. Only if you feel compelled to go out and protest, and you should do so peacefully, not intruding or trampling on the rights of others. And building on that discussion, I expounded on the idea that if you live in the Republic of Ireland or if you live in Northern Ireland, that you're not really compelled and you shouldn't really go out and protest any cause, because in these two nations, it is highly unlikely for people in the Republic of Ireland and people in Northern Ireland to go out and protest the ill treatment of American citizens by virtue that Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland is captured by the U.S. government. And so essentially it's being treated as a satellite state of the U.S. and has to rely on the instructions of the U.S. government. And so sitting in exedra of the behavior of ICE, there was a white American who posted a video on one of his socials, and essentially is summarizing what he was saying was that he believed that Black Americans should go out and protest the incidents that we're seeing take place in the United States as a result of the conduct of ICE, that we should go out and protest it as Black Americans because Black Americans have been mistakenly kidnapped by ICE officials and taken to detention centers and ill-treated there. And the responses from Black Americans was not a surprise. Most Black Americans were like, that they felt essentially they aspersed the instructions of this social media influencer or this activist that is this white activist that's protesting the behavior of ICE and the incidents that are taking place. And the reason why they did so is because our argument is that we have been talking about this for a very long time. We have been warning white America that this kind of police violence, these extrajudicial executions, are harmful to the nation. We have provided a creditable harbinger to the American people that I believe giving extra police protections to these agencies will lead, I think, that it would only lead to state crime, in my personal opinion. And what I believe is that these extra powers that has been given to ICE and other law enforcement, it exposes their criminogenic nature. Indeed, we see that very small actions of American citizens pushing back, not literally, but figuratively, pushing back, could result in their life being taken on the streets. And this is what Black Americans have been trying to relay to the wider U.S. public, that this is essentially a serious problem. And building on that idea, ladies and gentlemen, what we have seen is that Black Americans have been relegated to a non-authoritative position on police violence. And as someone who has studied crime, state crime in the United States for several years and have really paid close attention to it, and I have tried to warn my university here in Belfast, Queen's University, I've tried to warn the students that I'm seeing protesting on the streets today. I just seen a bunch of protesters walk down my street protesting against the United States, most, if not all of them, Irish. And they didn't heed my warning. And so now they are, I believe, in fear that the United States' tentacles are going to extend into this nation and start making some of the decisions or influence their political leaders to make the same decisions that we're seeing take place across the United States of America. And had they only listened, and that seems to be what I'm seeing across several videos that Black Americans are posting. Had you guys listened to our lived experience about police brutality, had you listened to our experience about these extrajudicial executions, had you listened to our thoughts and our voices on really police reform, and not only reforming the police system, but reforming the criminal justice system. Had you listened to us when we were trying to tell you that this would happen, this train would not arrive at your doorstep, right? And Black people have always had a pro-positional attitude on police violence. And even though we've had this pro-positional attitude of wanting to educate others on the harms of extrajudicial executions and the harms of essentially white supremacy in police structures. And had we been listened to, more importantly, had they listened to us, I think there would be a likelihood that this would not have taken place. That's not to say what is taking place is good, because we know it's never good for anybody to lose their life at the hands of law enforcement. And that is not to say that Black Americans are sitting back and saying, see, gotcha, we're not saying that. We're essentially exhausted with having to discuss the same issues over and over and over without the necessary change. And Black Americans have spoke out loud and clear about there being this kind of we've spoken out about this being the result of voting for conservatism in the United States. Now, I still am of the opinion that the United States has a problem with firearms. The United States has a problem with gun violence. And people believe that, because the Second Amendment is written in the Constitution, that we should close our eyes to the harm that it's doing. But we need to really wake up and pay attention that the Constitution is a living instrument. And I think that most would agree that the founders who wrote the Constitution intended on it being a living instrument for it to change and essentially yield to recent times, yield to current times, yield to what's evolving in time. And keeping the Second Amendment the way it is only a detriment to, I believe, the welfare of the citizenry. That's not to argue that Black Americans feel embittered about not being heard fully. Black Americans essentially, we're exhausted. And we're exhausted that when we come to the table with ideas, our ideas are stolen, and the dominant society is using our ideas to uplift themselves. We are exhausted that whenever we try and protect our communities, that the dominant society is finding some way to a loophole or this sliver of this opening to continue to enact political violence on the masses. And we're just exhausted about that. And I believe that is what is leading most Black Americans to say, hey, don't tell us that we should go out and protest A, B, C, or D, because when we were protesting these very issues, when we were talking about these very issues, nobody stood in solidarity with us. Nobody protected us. And so now it almost feels as if white America wants us to be embroiled into these protests and embroiled into these movements that they have created so that we can be the guardrail to being banged up by ICE, or that we can be the punching bag for ICE, or we can shield them from the violence of ICE. And that's not to argue that Black Americans are some superpower, but we're just not in the mood to be the magical Negro anymore. You know, like, we don't want to go in and save the day as a side character, you know, a sidekick, a side character, someone who is not the protagonist in the story. And we know that that's what is really going to happen, is that Black Americans will go out and try and do something really good about protesting these police, these extrajudicial executions that we are seeing take place across America. And then what will happen? We'll have the Federal Bureau of Investigation come out with a COINTELPRO 2.0, or calling Black Americans Black identity extremists. And then what happens then? Black Americans are wrongfully imprisoned. And then while they're in prison, they are incarcerated on these trumped up charges. And I think just Black Americans are exhausted about it, you know, exhausted with it. And as a Black American living abroad, I can say I 100% understand. 100% understand. To reiterate, I was at Queen's University, Belfast, and I was speaking out against political repression, state crimes happening, of course, in this jurisdiction, happening in the United States of America. And nobody stood up for me. No one, not one person stood up for me. And keep in mind, I had American professors. Some of my professors were Americans. None of them stood up for me. They knew exactly what was happening. They knew exactly that state agents were trying to stop my right to education and interfered with my dissertation, and no one stood up for me. I wrote a letter to all of my cohorts, which, keep in mind, all of the cohorts that I wrote the letter to were in my International Human Rights Law program. So I'm in an International Human Rights Law program. I have International Human Rights Law professors. I have American students, all of them white, and some not. Some weren't, but majority of them were white. In my program, American did not stand up for me. Did not stand up for me. Knew what I was going through. They actually contacted my entire class, my entire program, every student in my program. And nobody stood up for me. Nobody marched for me. Nobody stood in solidarity with me. Nobody said what was happening to Kiana was wrong. And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I got along with everyone. Didn't get into a fight. Didn't have any arguments with any students, any professors. Got along with every person at Queen's University Belfast, and they hung me out to dry. And this is the story of the black American experience. This is what we experience time and time again, that when we're victimized and when we are ill-treated, we don't have people backing us up. We don't have institutions backing us up to say that that kind of behavior, that conduct is wrong. We don't have people marching en masse unless we get out en masse and march. Excuse me. And sometimes people will go out during our causes and protest violently to try and disrupt our message. And that's what we have seen happen. We've seen that happen before. We're seeing that happen now. We're seeing alleged informants out trying to discredit Black Americans in the United States to make Black Americans look as if they are violent. And that is why Black Americans are choosing, really, most are choosing not to go out and protest these issues, because we're just tired of being blamed for things that we don't do. If we sit at home and we watch from our windows the protests, you can't say Black Americans were involved if something breaks out or if something goes wrong. And this has been something that has happened here in Belfast, is they have been trying to push and push and push and push to try and get Black, I believe I'm the only Black American here in Belfast, but to get Americans involved in these protests. But when Americans do go out, then you want to try, when Americans decide to go out, then there is negative stories being published in the Belfast Telegraph and at the direction of information gathering agencies. And then we have, our allies treating us horribly, or our alleged allies treating us horribly, silencing us, muting us, censoring us when we are censoring us when we're trying to give them a different approach about how to protest white supremacy. And so if they don't want to listen to it, then all we can do is just take a step back and say, do with it as you will. And so a person that had an interesting perspective was Tim Black, and he believed that Black Americans shouldn't go out and protest. And his reasoning was essentially what we have seen. To reiterate, when Black Americans go out and protest, there is the FBI racially profiling us, this new era of COINTELPRO, these new labels being attached to Black Americans and unjustly attached to Black Americans. Now keep in mind, in order to put a label on a group, you need a pattern and a practice. And not only do you need a pattern and a practice, but you need consistency. You need a specific demographic coming out doing something specific all the time. And that's what we're seeing with the Trump administration, is we're seeing the labeling of minority groups. And it's been difficult to place a label on Black Americans right now during this administration, is because Black Americans have been taking a seat. And Black Americans have been sitting on the sidelines, not going into the game. So you can't say that Black Americans, they committed a foul, or they didn't shoot from the 3-point line correctly, or they missed the layup. You can't say any of that because Black Americans are deciding not to play in this game. Now, don't get me wrong. I anticipate that authorities will endeavor to try and edge its way closer to a narrative that paints Black Americans in a negative light. It has always done that. But what we're seeing take place is a country that has not atoned for its legacy of racialized violence, its legacy of slavery, and its legacy of marginalization. And until there is atonement for that, and that atonement doesn't come because there is a new Democratic candidate, the atonement comes with realizing that the United States has made a mistake and that it needs to correct it. Now, people are saying, well, if you haven't voted for Trump, if you had voted for Kamala, no, there's problems with both parties. There's problems with the Democratic Party, and there's problems with the Republican Party. And until the United States makes amends and and atones for that harmful legacy, I believe we'll continue to see this. And that is just something the United States has not done. It has put the rug over that legacy, swept it under the carpet. And just because you sweep it under the carpet doesn't mean that it's gone. It's still there. And so what do you think? Do you think that the United States should at once and for all address its participation in the transatlantic slave trade, its legacy of racialized violence from when we've seen this happen with lynching, the KKK, police violence, of course, coming after that? Do you think that now is a perfect time for the Democrats to really think about, if they get into office, putting brakes and halts on the powers of police and agencies like ICE? And do you think that would change? Do you think that America would see decrease in crime? Do you think that America would see decrease in police-related incidents, lethal violence? These are all things that I want to know. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.